an arts degree, and I
Right.
majored in philosophy and German.
Right. Okay.
With a bit of pol sci around the edges and some ancient civs and stuff like that. Yes.
You didn't want to become a teacher, but
No.
what made you?
Well, yeah. So my mum, her career was working as a union field officer for teachers. So I'd fielded many a call on a weekend and late afternoons from distressed teachers calling her at home. So I kind of, in that experience, went, I never want to be a teacher. That's just way too hard.
Yes.
So, and it's one of those things, careful what you say you're never going to be, because that's what you'll become. So I did my arts degree with this idea of I don't know what I'm going to do. And at the end of my arts degree, I thought, well, I could go and philosophise in German. Not many job prospects there.
Yes.
And they were actually recruiting for what was then called the Bachelor of Teaching degree.
Right.
And because I had a language qualification there, they said, have you ever thought of becoming a language teacher? And so I went to the little recruiting meeting that they came and sat with, and I thought, wow, I don't know what else to be. It's this or go out and find work, and I have no idea what that would even look like.
So let's just do it.
So I did a 2-year Bachelor of Teaching degree.
Wow. And taught German.
And taught German. My first placement was actually at a school out in Traralgon.
Right.
Where I was teaching German there, yeah.
Wow. And what was it like after you decided that teaching was going to be your profession for a while? What was it like when you first started out?
Look, I love teaching. So many elements of teaching. It just lights up my heart. I love so many things about it, but it's an incredibly hard profession.
Very hard profession.
Yeah, and so I remember my first year of teaching was, I moved over to Victoria to take up my position, and kind of, living by myself, and because my then boyfriend, who is now my husband, was still finishing his uni degree, and so I was by myself and started my first teaching position, and it was hard work, and I had some tough classes, incredibly supportive colleagues, but at the same time, I remember hitting Easter and just having a bit of came in one day, I'm like, oh my god, this is just too hard, like I'm, had a particularly tough group, and one of the teachers kind of, figuratively picked me up off the floor kind of thing, and she said, we're waiting for this. We're waiting for you to fall apart. And I thought, well, that's a bit rough. And she said, well, because you were just so together. And so I've got this. I'm on top of it. And we knew that at some point you were going to crack, but we couldn't step in until
you actually
now.
did.
And so now we're going to step in and
help you.
And help me.
Yeah. So how was that? What was that feeling like of falling in that heap? And having those people around you to support you, which is a pretty amazing thing, isn't it?
Oh, look, I had huge support when I first moved there as well. And there's actually a couple of teachers that really, to the point where like they came over and helped me kind of do the garden of the rental property and cut things back and fix up the irrigation system there, and that kind of letting me get settled in, and so I was hugely supported, but it was a really weird mix, because in one sense I was grateful that they were picking me up and that they were so compassionate about that whole thing, and then there was, I suppose, another two sort of emotions going on there. The other one was, how dare they let me get to this stage?
Right, okay.
And then the other one was, I am so utterly ashamed that I am falling apart like this. People must think so much less of me.
What's the shame? What was the shame?
At the time, and look, this is a story that I carried through my whole life, really.
Yes.
And really was that idea of, I have to be in control. I have to be on top of things. I have to be the one with the answers. I have to be the one who knows what's going on and can help people and that kind of thing. It was my way of controlling my life, and so to then be in a situation where I didn't have the answers, I wasn't in control, it was for me at the time it was not a humiliating experience, but one that I felt deep shame about, because I'm not what I want to be. I'm not what I should be.
Define shame.
a feeling of wanting to crawl away and hide.
Okay.
A feeling of I am being judged by others as being less than. I am being judged by others of not being worthy of their support, concern, whatever. Fill in your blank. I mean, it's certainly not a rational thing, and it's a story that I have then since really had to tackle. But yeah, at the time, what was going on in my head at that time was that's what was going on.
Okay. Are there any other times, or were there any other times in your life before that you had shame?
Yeah, I think my whole childhood, in a way, was one that felt that I never fitted in.
Okay, because you were the middle child.
Yes.
You had an older brother and a younger brother.
Yes.
And what was it that you felt, or why was it that you felt you never fitted in? Because you were a girl?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I always joke about my older brother was an evil genius. He used to do all sorts of cruel tricks, and we're very close friends now, and I mean, I'm staying on his lounge room floor while I'm here, kind of thing, so
yeah.
we get on really well. But really, up until I was about 15, we had an extremely conflict-filled relationship, and one that was, I think in some ways, a real strong rivalry.
Yes. It's probably more of a rivalry, a brother and sister thing, and him playing the toughie and tormenting you and getting great pleasure out of it.
Absolutely. Look, tormenting me in ways like, this will give you an insight into what I mean by an evil genius. I wanted to have a club. We'd moved from the farm into Launceston for a couple of years. There was a block of time we were actually living between both places. I wanted to have a club, and there was this sort of shed kind of bit underneath the house which I thought would be a great clubhouse, and I'd seen it on, like the babysitter club and, on TV of, kids having clubs and clubhouses. I thought, this is going to be great. So I wanted to have a club, and I was telling my brothers about it. My brother said, you need to have a president. And you need to have an election to have the president elected of the club. And here's me thinking, yeah, no worries, it'll be like a shoe-in because it's my club, I'm going to be the president. And then he told me that the way you vote is that if you vote one, that's one vote, but if you vote three, well, that's three votes. So you need to vote, so you can vote 1, 2, and 3, but then applied actually what the normal electoral system is, which is vote 1 is your top preference. So he managed to psychologically rig the election so that he was elected the president of my own club, and his first act as president of the club was to vote me out of my own club. So that gives you any insight to
I'd like to meet him.
Right. Evil genius at work.
That's very interesting. That's called manipulation, and that's very clever.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's why you call him
total
a genius.
Admiration for him now, but at the time I wasn't quite so cool about it.
No. So what happened to the club? Did it form, or did it?
No, I think it pretty much folded after that.
I can understand that. Understand. So what was your feeling when he actually voted you out of your own club of being president?
Oh, look, utter humiliation and shame. And I think that's, that's one of the, like I said, that was my story for a long time. And I also found, because growing up in a small rural community, you see those programs about small rural communities, and like, everyone knows everyone, and they're, so close. And it's like, yeah, that's true.
In one way,
and pretty vicious in another. So I never really fitted in that sense, because I wasn't I wasn't the towny small town person, so I didn't get to, I wasn't the kind of person that could go up the streets to, and that I, for only a few years was in Launceston as well, whilst we were still on the farm, but it was very significant years from that sort of prep to grade 4, I think. So I came back to the same school when I was in grade 5. And,
so how was that?
And I was the snob. I was the townie. I was the posh kid that thinks she's better than everyone else. And And I even remember, in fact, it's funny that this has come up because it was only last week I was writing about this exact experience. I remember waiting, it was in primary school, waiting, lined up for all of the buses, because we were all different rural buses, lining up. And I remember this boy, I can still remember his name, I won't say it on air, but, and I don't know what we got into a conflict about. Honestly, I don't think it even matters, but he just said, you just think you're better than all of us.
Really?
And I was horrified because I'd never thought that.
Yes.
And I was horrified to think that someone thought that I was better than them. And before I could even say, no, I've never thought that way, there were already a good half a dozen other kids around him that were like, yeah, you know, and in that moment I thought, wow, I don't even realise how
people perceive you.
Well, but in that moment, it wasn't because, you know, you're a kid. Like, I just wasn't enlightened enough to realise, but it was like, I'm so unaware of what a terrible person I am that I'm not even aware of how terribly I treat other people, because this must be right that I think I'm better than other people, because there's half a dozen people saying that that's the case.
So you then believed that, and you convinced yourself of that. So how long did that last for?
That in a way, I had a very interesting, you know, high school experience, because, and that very much always feeling a little bit on the outer, because there'd be times where I'd have, you know, friendship groups and they would fall apart, and they were pretty mean, tough experiences. I remember like grade 7, you know, I was with a group of girls that we carried over from primary school, and they were all in one class and I was in an entirely separate grade 7 class, which was really tough anyway, but we'd meet up at recess and lunch. And I remember one day we used to just wander around the school, and they started walking really quickly away from me, and I couldn't keep up, or like I could if I'd wanted to, but it occurred to me that this was ridiculous.
Yes.
And so I just stopped, and I thought, this, you know, they don't want anything to do with me. So I went to at the time I didn't even see her as a friend really. That we used to sit together on the bus together, but she was a couple of years older than me, and I remember in tears going to her at another part of the school saying that you know, this is what's happening. And she said, well, you just hang out with me. And then about a week later of that, I was approached by one of the girls, and she said, oh, we need to talk, you know, we need to deal with this. And I'm like, okay. And so we met, and everyone started to walk off, and she was like, oh, come on guys, we need to deal with this now. And they kept walking, and she's like, oh, well, just consider yourself back in the group. And I went, okay, and turned on my heel and went back to where I was before.
Yes.
And it was that kind of ostracizing that really characterized my experience as well, because I was never the city kid. When I was living in town, I was the farm girl.
Yes.
And when I was in the country town, I was always the city girl that was the poshy that thinks she's better than all of us. So I never quite fitted in. And my parents, even coming into the community, you know, my parents joke that they're only just starting to be accepted as locals in the community, and they've lived there for, you know, 40, 50 years. Like they were the hippies that moved down from Sydney and lived in the hills, you know. So it's just one of those funny.
It was hippie time though then, wasn't it? But you know, it's interesting what we perceive as a child or as an individual when, you know, you're feeling a little bit vulnerable, and those sorts of things happen, and someone says to you, you know, you're not a part of the group, or they just make you feel like you're not a part of the group. So did you feel shame in that, or was that just bringing up the vulnerability and the sadness from within, feeling you're not being a part of a group?
I think for me, that to me is that was a really formative experience. So it was both confirmation that I don't fit in, and the belief that I had always from a very young age felt that I don't fit in was confirmed. But it was also very empowering, because especially that final moment where I was told, well, consider yourself back in the group, and I went, yep, and went back to where, not with that group, you know, and went back to where I had been hanging out, and so that was a very empowering moment where it was, I cannot fit in, and I can be okay about that.
Yes. Yes. So some form of acceptance was there, but it wasn't really there.
Yeah. So it was a real, very, very dualistic kind of experience where it was both empowering because it was like, well, I don't fit in, but I'm okay with, like, that can be okay. But I think that feeling of I don't quite fit in still did hurt for quite a few years after that, of that feeling. And like, I talked to my mum about these things, and you know, it's all about cycles, because she has that experience too, of that feeling of never quite fitting in. You know, she was the Dutch girl that didn't quite fit with the rest of the Australians, and she had funny quirks and ways of doing things. And so it was just that experience of just not quite fitting in.
And it's that middle child syndrome, isn't it? Because I understand where you're coming from. I'm one of 9, as I say, and I was the middle child, and I felt like I never fitted in. But I don't think I felt like you had those sort of feelings. It was just, you know, I didn't fit in, but who cares? I'm just there anyway. And I'll do what I do because that's what I do. I never conformed. Because I'm still not a conformist.
Good way to be in the world.
But I'm a bit of a rebel. I like being a rebel. But we're going for a break, and we're coming back. Thank you for listening. We'll be back later.